Welcome to day 20 of our 30-day insurance and risk management vlog. This is Matthew Struck with Treadstone Risk Management, and today we're talking about fleet safety plans and motor vehicle reports. So any business or organization that maintains a fleet, it could be a fleet of one vehicle or it could be a fleet of 100, it could be a daunting task to make sure to maintain the fleet, make sure it's safe to operate, and keep vehicles in working condition to continue doing your daily, day-to-day job and day-to-day operations. So this is just a little snippet of, some of what you can do in order to put together a plan to make sure that your fleet stays in good working condition, and also that you have responsible, safe drivers behind the wheel. So let's do it. All right, vehicle safety plans. The purpose is to maintain the fleet, make sure that all the vehicles or all the equipment within the fleet are in good working condition and that they remain reliable to operate. If you have a low level of reliability in your fleet, or if it's unsafe, there's going to be all kinds of negative effects. You're going to have interruptions in your ability to do business. You're going to have decreases in your customers' faith that you'll be able to perform your duties on a reliable basis and maintain deadlines and whatnot. And then also you're going to have an issue in terms of the safety, and you might have increases in your auto liability claims from having a bunch of accidents as a result of mechanical failures and whatnot. So you definitely want to take steps in order to avoid that. So let's talk about the structure of the plan. Step one is actually have a plan. Write it out, make sure that it's a living document that is available to, at the very least, the fleet manager or whoever has to head up overseeing the fleet itself, but also make it available to the individual drivers and mechanics and anyone else that might be involved in maintaining and keeping up your fleet. It should include routine maintenance, and the routine maintenance should be targeted towards the various types of vehicles and equipment that you have in your fleet. Some fleets are very diverse. You might have private passenger vehicles, motorcycles, little, kind of roadworthy golf carts, and then all the way up to 18-wheelers, dump trucks, large pieces of road equipment that actually have a license plate and can be driven on roadways. So you always have to take into account the specific equipment and vehicles that you have in the fleet, and each one of them is going to have specialized maintenance schedules and types of maintenance that will have to be done routinely. All right, you should have daily checks and inspections. Those should be done by, for the most part, should be done by the drivers before they check a vehicle out in order to do a shift with any of the vehicles. But also you might require daily inspections using a mechanic or someone else that does work on the vehicles, especially if they're vehicles that take a beating or have a very high usage level, to make sure that everything's in safe operating order. When the drivers do their checklist, they should make sure and do both an exterior and an interior checklist. They should be looking at things like lights, turn signals, the wear on the tire, just the overall exterior of the vehicle. And then on the inside, they should be reporting things like mileage, fluid levels, whether or not there are any warning lights on, and then the general state of the interior of the vehicle in terms of its aesthetics and functionality. Any unsafe or failing issues with any one of the individual vehicles should result in immediate action. If it's a condition that the vehicle can still be operated under safely without any problems, then it just needs to go in your queue of things to take care of in the future. But if it's something major where the tire wear is extreme, or if there's a knocking sound in the engine, or anything that looks like it's going to be a complete failure of the vehicle to be able to do its day-to-day job, you need to immediately take action to remedy that problem. And then it goes without saying, but if any of the vehicles do have a failing condition, they need to be immediately taken out of service. And that stems from what we talked about earlier in terms of they can create auto claims and collisions and accidents, or they could also serve as a really bad problem when it comes to reliability of delivering your services or operating in an efficient manner. All right, so let's talk about some pitfalls and kind of best practices. So the pitfalls, make sure that the daily checklists are occasionally randomly checked to make sure that they're actually capturing the issues that you need to capture. The daily operators of the vehicles might be in a rush just to get to their shift and get to work. And they might just run down and yes, 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 or okay, okay, okay. And they might be completely overlooking certain issues. So you have to hold the drivers or whoever's doing the daily checklist to task to make sure that they're actually filling it out with a level of scrutiny and making sure to be truthful about all the items that are on there. Maintenance records should be kept orderly in the event of an accident or a breakdown. So in a lot of cases, if there is a mechanical failure that results in a claim, it could have been a failure of your maintenance program, or it could have been a general failure of your vehicle manufacturer's design, in which case you might actually be able to pass off some of the liability or remove yourself from liability completely by having those maintenance records in order and being able to push back against a claim that alleged that you didn't maintain the vehicle properly. All right, the plan needs to be reviewed annually for adequacy and effectiveness, and you need to make sure to update it, because if your operations change, if your fleet size or the composition of your fleet changes, obviously that's going to have follow-through effects on the maintenance schedule, how things are maintained and inspected, and who's responsible for doing what in the plan. And then finally, the effectiveness of the plan has to be evaluated every single year, because you need to make sure that it's actually performing the way that you intend it to perform. Is it actually identifying breakdowns or maintenance issues before they become a problem? Is it saving you money? Is it helping you be more efficient and more reliable in your operations? Or are you still having problems in terms of breakdowns on the way to job sites and whatnot? All right, so once you've assured that you have vehicles that are safe to operate and they're going to be reliable, we need to make sure that the people who are actually operating them are safe and reliable themselves. So this comes down to motor vehicle reports and training. I should hope that the majority of your drivers are receiving some level of training so that they drive in a safe manner and a responsible manner, that they know how to operate the vehicles that they're operating, and that they're actually licensed according to state and federal regulations such as CDL licensing and whatnot. The next thing to look at is the purpose of why are we going to pull motor vehicle reports. So motor vehicle reports are going to give you back information related to the safety of the driver in terms of their overall behavior. And it's going to give you an idea of what their driving behavior is, not just on the job, but also away from the job. It's also going to key you in on certain red flags. Have they lost their license, or is it suspended or revoked? Have they had DUI incidents, or have they had large infractions that they've been ticketed for, or been given points for as a result of reckless driving and whatnot? All of those things are going to give you some sense of whether or not a driver should be afforded a vehicle, because you have to remember that if that driver does behave irresponsibly or unsafely behind the wheel of one of your vehicles, you're the one getting sued, because they're going to allege that you negligently allowed someone who is known to be an unsafe driver to operate one of your vehicles. And the worse that it gets, the bigger the damages are, because you could also be brought up for punitive damages in a legal case for just completely looking the other way and letting someone who is a reckless driver behind the wheel of one of your vehicles. All right, so let's talk about the plan and the procedures here. So the structure of the plan starts with making sure that the checks are done on first-time drivers, so when you first hire someone, to make sure that they're good from the start. But there should also be annual motor vehicle reports drawn on your drivers, because those drivers, they can have issues over time, and whereas when you hired them, they might have been a good, responsible, safe driver, their driving habits might change. They might have a change in their license status, so that you need to routinely check to make sure that those things are up to date. No exceptions should be made based off of the results of the MVR'S when they're pulled. Just because you have a good relationship with someone or an employee doesn't necessarily mean that they should be afforded the ability to drive even though they have a very bad driving record. Because You know what? There might be circumstances in which it's understandable that they have certain infractions on their driving record, but because you're buddy-buddy with them, and if you let them behind the wheel and they just by happenstance have a really bad accident, guess who's going to get nailed to the wall? It's going to be you. So you always have to make sure that you're not allowing certain special considerations to stop you from taking the actions that you need to make sure that you're not putting an unsafe driver behind the wheel of one of your vehicles. All right, checks should be done through a reliable third party. Whether most state DMVs will actually give you a portal to be able to pull motor vehicle records, but you can also in some cases go to the state police or a local police department if they have that service available, where they can pull it and they can give you certain information. Some insurance agents also have the ability to pull these MVR'S. Just remember that certain providers are going to be able to give you varying levels of information. In most cases, drivers, you can't necessarily get all of their infractions. Some states allow you to, some don't. In some cases, you'll just kind of get a red light, yellow light, green light kind of report that shows you, whether someone's safe, unsafe, or somewhere in between. And then you have to rely on your written policies to determine whether or not you're going to allow those folks to operate one of your vehicles. Employees should be notified in their handbook, or if you're going to begin instituting motor vehicle reports after you already have your handbook out there and it's not included just yet, they need to get a memo that updates them, that lets them know from this point in time forward we're going to be doing this, and they need to be notified that this information is going to be pulled. And also, CDL drivers should be reminded of their duties. They have specific duties as CDL drivers to notify you of certain driving changes. If they've lost their license, or if they have been prescribed opioids or other pharmaceuticals that are going to hinder their ability to safely drive a vehicle, they have to notify you. It's actually required within their licensing process. And if they don't, obviously you're going to have some major issues if they do get into an accident. So make sure to remind them in writing of their duties, whether it be in their handbook or via a global memo occasionally. When needed, you might want to include a certain tool that helps you kind of decide some of those borderline decisions. And it's this internal review board idea where you have 3 or 5 internal employees or supervisors that would sit on a board and review certain issues. So if someone comes back with their motor vehicle report and it's one of those yellow light situations, you need some kind of review process to document what administrative action you're taking, whether you're not going to allow them or you are, and specifically when you are going to allow them, there should be some written kind of justification as to why that employee was allowed to get behind the wheel. Because if a claim results after the fact, they're going to ask you, why was this individual afforded the ability to drive? And this gives you at least some documented ability to prove what the thought process was behind giving them the opportunity. Establish strict guidelines in terms of how things should happen following an accident, who to communicate, who to call, whether or not the vehicle should be taken out of service immediately. This is going to include some consideration as to how bad the accident is. If it's a fender bender, it doesn't require a ton of action. They just need to report it and make sure that it goes through the proper channels, and then they can probably go right back to work. But if it's a very bad accident where multiple people are injured, multiple cars are involved, or God forbid there's a fatality or a major trauma, all of those things should have certain ramifications in terms of policies and procedures that need to be followed after the fact. You should immediately pull drivers off the road if even if they haven't had a bad MVR come back, but say they've had 2 on-the-job accidents, driving accidents within a certain period of time, say it's 6 months, you should probably pull them off the road or put them on some kind of probationary status and include some retraining requirement like defensive driving to make sure that you're doing your best to get that driver to the point where they're able to drive safely. All of these steps can lead up to the ultimate decision, which might be to part ways with the driver in terms of their employment, but there should be some kind of progressive disciplinary or action plan to address a driver who has multiple accidents or a really bad accident. All right, establish steps for the driver to get back into service and have it written down, okay? This comes from CDL, so CDL drivers in a lot of cases when they have certain issues, there's actually a CDL process for getting them back into what they call a safety sensitive driving position. Well, you should apply some similar practices to all of your drivers. So if they have any of these bad accidents or if they've exhibited unsafe driving habits, there needs to be some written plan or process of steps to get them to the point where you say, okay, you can drive again, you have your driving ability back. And it helps communicate it to the employee to let them know what they need to do, and it also helps document your rationale for putting someone back into a driving position after they've had prior issues in their driving history. All right, and really quickly, some really quick pitfalls to avoid. Big no-no is forgetting to routinely pull the MVR'S, making exceptions when adverse events happen or they show up in an employee's motor vehicle report, improperly informing employees of your policy, failing to take swift action to remove a driver or a vehicle from the road then when it's found that there's an unsafe condition present. And it might not be a good practice to keep copies of employees' driver's license on file. This varies by state. This should definitely be a question for your attorney because it is sensitive identification information, and whether or not you keep it on file really is going to be determined by what's legal and also whether or not you want to take on the risk of having that information in a file that could be stolen or could be alleged that that information was used improperly. So always remember that. All right, we have some other resources that'll be linked along with the video or in the full form blog post. I hope you got something out of this. We were talking about motor vehicle reporting and fleet safety plans, and please subscribe, hit like, share, comment, ask questions. We really want to hear back from you, and we'll see you on the next day.